Hey everyone, I'm Pastor Jay and welcome to Simple Church Online. Whether you missed last Sunday, you're checking us out for the first time, or maybe even watching out of state, we're so glad that you're a part of our community. And we're praying today that as you watch, God would use this to bless your life. Enjoy the message.
Which makes me feel really old, but that's an old school song right there, How He Loves, and that song was certainly overdone in the Christian circuit, but then sometimes we forget about songs, we just give up on songs, and so I want to bring that back today because it's really important as we continue to talk about marriage and relationships. It's really important to understand that we love because He first loved us. And as we talk through this whole marriage thing and relationship, it's really got to start there, because there's going to be times where you don't feel like loving people, right? But as a Christ follower, we are commanded. Jesus says, we're going to read it here in a minute, but Jesus says, this new commandment I give you, love one another. And so as we hear about God's love for us, that has to be the basis for how we love people. If we love people just from our own human perspective, even our spouses, it's probably not going to go well. I don't know if you know this, people are annoying. I don't know if you picked up on this in life. And it's typically because there's some problems with us that we reflect on other people, right? So it's this vicious circle if we just try to love from a human perspective. And so we want to love from God's perspective. And so as we talk about this today, that's really important. And before we jump into this, I want to share about something because I've heard a few people ask, why are we doing a marriage series? Why are we focusing on this? I'm not married, or I'm married, or I was married, or anything like this. And it's so funny to me in the Christian world that we become very me-centric. If the thing isn't specifically about me and what I want, then I'll just find a different church or do my, whatever. When what we really should be doing is let's dive into Scripture and see how much in the New Testament they talk about marriage. Let's see how much they talk about intimacy. Let's see how much they talk about money. And what are the things that the church doesn't talk about? Intimacy and money, right? Because that doesn't feel good. And so you can't do that in the American church. You have to stay away from those things. Let's let the world teach them how to do it, right? So instead of celebrating and people coming along and saying, you know what? Yeah, we should be talking more about marriage. If you went through a terrible marriage, you should be cheering on the church. Talk more about it. Talk about how to be a great spouse. But sometimes it seems like we get so internally focused that we miss out on the bigger picture. Here's the truth. We're going to do a parenting series at some point. That's not going to hit everybody, right? We're not always going to be able to hit everybody in their unique relationship. There are people who are walking through separations. There are people who walk through bad divorces. There are people who are married and basically living apart in the same home. There are great marriages, right? We cannot hit every single marriage. But what we should be doing as a church family is coming along and saying, how can we lift each other up? How can we celebrate each other? If you've been through hard times in your marriage, you should be amening. If you have a great marriage, you should be amening and saying, hey, yes, this is what we need to talk about. This is Scripture. We have to understand that as they wrote these letters to the churches, these are the things that they got up in church and read to the churches. Go to the Corinthians and learn about how, I won't get into the exact situation. It was a really bad situation. And they called them out. Imagine sitting there and they literally called out your relationship in the middle of church. We've got to get away from this me-centric society and see the larger picture, the truth of Scripture, the things that Jesus was passionate about, and one of those things was marriage. God is very passionate about that, so we're going to celebrate that together today. So for some reason, I felt like I needed to give that qualifier today. At the end of the service, I'm going to talk about, we have a young adult meeting coming up. So again, we're trying to hit every group that we possibly can. We just can't always do that. And so today, I want to talk about, as we continue, we're in week 3 of this series called Tighten the Knot. And again, your situation is going to be different than everyone else's. You may have a super strong marriage. You may be divorced. But all of this stuff is great for not just marriages, but also relationships. And certainly today, we're going to talk about demonstrative love. And God certainly did that through Jesus. But I want to talk to you about my first car. So when I turned 16, my dad found a cheap 84 Z28 Camaro with T-tops. That wasn't the nicest car in the world, but for me, it was fantastic. And my dad is a mechanic, and so he painted it up, and it was a dark blue metallic, and it was a really cool car for me. And I love that thing. I was so proud of it. I put a system in it because I'm a straight gangster. I had two Kicker-Con 12s. I kid you not. I want you to picture this, okay? I didn't hit a growth spurt until about my senior year, and so I was always really short. So I'm leaned back. Some of you who know me, I've told this before, but I was leaned back listening to Death Row Records' greatest hits because I was super gangster. I don't know if that's something we scream for, but anyway, it just leaned back and you could barely see over the steering wheel. But I had the T-tops down and just bump. I had two Kicker-Con 12s and a Sony amp. But anyway, I thought it was really cool. Spent all my money on that. But I love that car. And in the beginning, I did such a great job of taking care of it. It was my baby. You know, when you first get something and it's your baby, and you take care of it. And then you know, I got busy. I got into my junior year, and in my senior year, I kind of went through a season where I just lost my mind for a minute, and man actually broke up with me for a little while, and which was it was a wake up call. And so I really just. I stopped taking care of that car as much as I loved it. I didn't check the oil. I didn't check water, anything like that. I was racing a car. No, I wasn't. It's really bad. I was driving in excess of the speed limit with another car, Firebird. I beat it. Anyway, not good. Don't do it. I could have killed myself. Don't drive fast. Also, don't drive slow, though, in the fast lane. This is getting way off. Okay, let's get back on course here. So I stopped taking care of this car. I was racing this car, and all of a sudden, my car just locked up. And took it home. Like I said, my dad's a mechanic, which was not good to take that home. But I cracked the head on it. I did not have an ounce of fluid in that car. There was no oil. There was no water. I destroyed that car. And it was. I wish I still had it. I loved that car. But I just stopped taking care of it. I stopped investing time in it. And as we started to talking about this idea of demonstrative love, that just hit me because I think that's a pretty good example of how a lot of marriages and relationships can go. In the beginning, you're excited, you're in love, man. We're feeling each other, and they're so cute, and all these things. But eventually, the tank runs empty, and eventually you kind of stop taking care of the way that you used to. If we're not careful, we end up with a rundown car. And like I said, maybe for some of you today, that's where you're at. Maybe some of you today, that's where you've been. And so I want to talk about that because what happens specifically in marriage, but it can also happen in just friendships and things like that, is, in the beginning, things are really good. When you're getting to know each other, you're trying to be careful and you're trying to be kind with the things that you say as you get to know them. And certainly if you're going into a dating relationship, you're in the in-love phase, or really in lust stage. Let's just be honest, right? And so you treat each other different because you're pursuing that person. So you're going to do things that you wouldn't normally do. Guys are going to dress up ways that they wouldn't normally dress up. They're going to, actually look good sometimes. And there's different things that we do when we're in love. We pursue that person. But what happens is in this in love phase, and I talk to this when I counsel with young people who are getting married. I always talk about how you're going to move out of the in love phase, the puppy love phase. And you're going to get to a phase where you start to see that person has some flaws. That person is not perfect and they do some annoying things. It's going to be a revelation because you thought that they were so perfect, right? You just stare at them and it's like, oh, you're so perfect. No, they're not. Nobody is, right? We're all broken people. So we get to this place where, okay, this person has flaws. This person does things that annoy me. What am I going to do now? And we get at a crossroads, and certainly in marriage this is the case, and a lot of times this happens around year 6 or 7. And you start to really become annoyed by those flaws, and then become pet peeves, and then they just become straight out things that you just can't stand. And we have the opportunity to stay in this in-love phase. Now the problem with the in-love phase is that if you can be in love, then you can be what? Out of love. And so this is not a realistic way to look at anything. This in love phase, because it's an emotion. Think about it. When you first meet somebody, when you start dating, there's your endorphins. It's literally a brain thing. There's a reason why you do things that are outside of what you would normally do just in life, because your endorphins are going, everything, your hormones are raging, right? And so you do things because you're in love. All these emotions are going. Well, the emotion eventually is going to go away, just like with anything else. My kids, when we got them new phones, I mean, you would think that was their baby. They were walking around like this. They had like a little sling to put, no, I'm just kidding. But you know what I mean? Like, when you get a kid something that's new, like they love it, and they give them about a year, what do? They're tossing it down the stairs to the couch, they're like kicking it over to their friend or whatever, right? And that's that's how marriage and relationships can be if we just are in love and it's just the emotion. The emotion's going to run out eventually. And then what are you left with? Well, the hope would be that we move on to a phase in love that is not about just emotion, but it's a phase that unites reason and will and emotion. We're not driven by these kind of lustful, emotional things, but we're driven by the choice and our will to choose to love those people. That's a completely different kind of love. That's a love that can endure all things. Because now it's not based on the mountains and valleys of how I feel. It's based upon my choice to love that other person. It's based upon that commitment and covenant that I made to that other person. Okay, I'll stop there. No, I won't. We live in such a world of feelings right now. Your feelings will lie to you. And then you have to make a choice. Well, it doesn't feel good. What do I do with that? That's not what love is. I'm sorry if you've got the wrong message. Love is a choice. Love is will. Love is doing what God did for us. And this is why it's so important to talk about this inside of church. Now again, if there are two people who are not following Jesus, I would tell them, if you want to fix your marriage, you need to find Jesus. That's it. I mean, love each other well, but I can't give you a commandment to do that. But if you're following Christ, there is a commandment to love others. And it's so important because what we're doing inside of a marriage is we're representing Jesus to the other person. Romans 5:6-8. When we were utterly helpless, Christ came at just the right time and died for us sinners. Now, most people would not be willing to die for an upright person. Would not be willing to die for an upright person, though some might perhaps be willing to die for a person who's especially good. But God showed His great love for us by sending Christ to die for us. Why? While we were still sinners. And I think that I love this song, Reckless Love, and I know that reckless can be a weird term, but what it's saying is, without thought for himself, without thinking about how he's going to be rejected by some people, without thinking about how he's going to be hated by some people, while we were still sinners, not when we were perfect, not when we had gotten everything right, before we had come to Him, before we had accepted salvation, He sent Jesus to us to show His love to us. That's reckless love. Without thought for myself, I'm sending Jesus to you. And so our job as Christ followers is to demonstrate that same love inside of our marriages. So we don't have room to say, well, when they do this, I'm so thankful God didn't, when Jay gets his act together, then I'll send Jesus to die for him. That would have been a really bad plan. I'm never going to get my act together. You got to see me up here. You know that's not going to happen, right? While we were still sinners, while we were utterly helpless, God sent Christ to die for us. 1 John chapter 4. This is the love chapter. That's what it says, starting in verse 9. God showed how much He loved us by sending His one and only Son into the world so that we might have eternal life through Him. This is real love. Not that we love God, but that He loved us and sent His Son as a sacrifice to take away our sins. Dear friends, since God loved us that much, we surely ought to love each other. John is imploring there. If God loved us so much to send Jesus before we could be, if He loved us first, even though we rejected Him, even though we sinned, then we at the least should love other people as best as we possibly can. That's what John is saying. Imploring us. If He matters at all to you, then you'll love people as best as you can. Do we always get it right? No. But that should be the goal. And certainly inside of a marriage where we're representing Christ, it should be the goal to love each other that well. I want to do one more over in John, because Jesus is about to be crucified. He's about to leave this earth. He's giving some last words to the disciples. And this is what he tells them in verse 34 of chapter 13. So now I'm going to give you a new commandment. Love each other just as I have loved you. You should love each other. Your love for one another will prove to the world you are my disciples. Let me ask you a really difficult question. Is your marriage relationship proving to the world that you're disciples of Christ? Because that should be the goal. That should be the goal. Not just to try to survive this, not just to try to get through, and if we make it to the other side after all the kids, then we sell it. No. Our relationships, and certainly our marriages, should show the world that we are disciples of Christ. How we parent our kids should show the world that we are disciples of Christ. If we're short-tempered, if we're flying off the handle with our kids, if we're not paying attention to them, if we're always annoyed by them and yelling at them, there's no way that's showing the love of Christ to a world that's broken and in need. It is our responsibility to show the love of Christ by the way we interact with other people. And Jesus said, this is the commandment that I give you. And why was he able to say that? He's saying, look at how I loved you, and just treat people that way. I'm going to give myself up for you. I'm going to sacrifice. It's not going to be about me. It's about you. I want to serve you and love you. And if we'll have that mentality, it's not just going to change our marriage relationships. It's going to change our world relationships. It's going to change just the tide of this world that we live in. The world needs more love, and it is our responsibility. We live in a time now, because we're so me-centric, that we're basically saying, when you get your stuff together, then you can be around me. I'm a Christ follower. I'm perfect. So you get your stuff together and then come and talk to me. You make the right choices, and then you can come to church. Which is completely opposite of what God says. I love you. I'm going to love them first. Why? Because God loved me first when I didn't deserve it. And I'm going to share that kind of love. And if that's the mentality that you will have inside of your relationships, certainly your marriages, you're going to be okay. I promise. You're going to have a great life. So we do these things because God demonstrated his love for us by sending Jesus to die in our place. So what does that practically look like in our lives? Well, I want to talk about that because I think it's really good to have these big ideas, and I really think that if God is at the center of your marriage, if you're committed to him, you will be committed to each other, and you will figure those things out. But I also think it's really good to have some practical knowledge on how to do these things. And one of the biggest books, we talked about Love and Respect. The other big book for Amanda and I was The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. And most of you have probably heard of that or been around it. There's a whole bunch of different versions of that. There's parenting ones, there's spouse ones, there's friend ones. So there's all kinds of different ones. And I would just suggest, again, if you want some practical knowledge on your spouse or any relationships, this is a great book to do it. For us, we discovered this book about 5 years into our marriage. We had a good marriage, but this book really, for me especially, it really helped me learn some very practical things that I was not picking up on as a young husband that I didn't figure out at the time. So I want to give you some of that information. If you've been through this, you know about the 5 love languages. If not, I'm going to give you kind of a highlight of the whole thing, but I would suggest getting the book and going through it together. I think it would be just awesome for your marriages from a biblical perspective. And what he talks about in this book is the idea that each person has a love tank. So we have this thing inside of us, this kind of hole that is filled up by the way that we love. And the way that we love is different from how other people love. And his point is that the things that we do, the way that we demonstrate love to other people fills up their tank as we do things for them. This is how the world works. The problem is our tank is always slowly draining because we live in an imperfect world, right? When we get to heaven, we'll have a perfect love tank, perfect heart, all of those things, right? But for now, for the time being, living in a broken world, our tank empties. And so we're constantly trying to fill each other's tanks up. And certainly inside of a marriage, we're making a commitment to say, you are more important than I am, so how can I continue to fill that love tank up? And that's a great place to start. If that's just your mindset inside of a relationship is how can I fill up your love tank, not how can you fill up mine, you're at a really, really good place. The problem is, and this is what the book brings out, is that people love in different ways. There's different ways that we love, and you don't always love the same way as your spouse, and vice versa. Oftentimes, you usually don't. And so even if you're trying, sometimes we're missing out on really pouring major things into that love tank. So if you're doing things, but you're not doing the things that your spouse really needs, then you're filling up the love tank, but not filling it up in the way that you could be. And so this is what we discovered through this book. That's a really quick summary of it. Again, I would say get the book, share it together, learn it together. So I want to go over these 5 love languages. You can go online. There's all kinds of tests that you can take. There's a test in the book if you get it. But I would say this. Go home. Don't like try to decipher what you are now. Go home and take the test. And then have some conversations about these if you've never done it. It will open your eyes to a whole new world, Aladdin style, of what marriage and demonstrative love can be. And so let's go through these. I want to just hit them, highlight them real quick, and then you can jump to more in depth with them. The first thing is words of affirmation. So this is the things that I say to someone and how I talk to them. And the scientists have studied and said that for every critical comment, it takes at least 5 positive compliments to counteract that one negative comment. So think about this. If you're in a marriage and there's negative comments going back and forth, even if you give like one compliment, you've only undone a fifth of one of the negative comments. You see how quickly this can go downhill? And so for someone whose words of affirmation, who that's their primary love language, and typically you have a primary love language of these 5, and you have a secondary love language. So there's one that really sticks out, and there's kind of a sub one that's pretty close to that. And so if someone is the primary love language is words of affirmation, then if you give them a negative comment, then it hurts even more. Because this is how I feel loved, by what you say to me. So the words that we say certainly matter. There's a story in the book of this. He was a counselor. Gary Chapman was a counselor as he started writing this book. He had a couple come to him, and the wife was upset because she'd been asking the husband to paint this room for 9 months now. Gary, he just won't do it. And they weren't in the same room together. He was counseling just with her. And Gary, I just can't get him to do it. I nag him all the time about it. And he said, okay, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Don't ever bring it up again. And she was taken back, he said. Well, what do you mean? How am I going to get it done? Here's what I want you to do. I want you to start complimenting anything good that he does around the house. If he takes out the trash, say, hey, I really appreciate taking that trash out. That's really helpful. And continue to do that. They came back 3 months later, and he had painted the room without her asking him. You see how words matter. Now, here's where our minds go. Wow, he's just a lazy, no good, no. No, he was a good husband. He just didn't know she just didn't know that he needed positive affirmation. That's the best way to get it. So the way that we say things matter. You know what I'm talking about. You know how much tone matters. You can say, hey, we take out the trash? Hey, we take out the trash? Huge difference, right? Which one's going to motivate me to do something? You say it like that, I'm not really going to want to. And also, let me just say this, and again, I know that sometimes it's bad to pigeonhole people. Wives, if you ask your husband to do something, he says he's going to do it, and you do it within the next 30 seconds, it's not helpful. If he said he's going to do it, let him do it. Anyway, that's not, anyway. I know, I don't want to get anybody in trouble in here, so don't be nudging anybody. I'm just saying. Tone matters. It matters how you speak to each other. Again, we would not talk to people at our office the way that we talk to our spouses most of the time. And so for someone whose words of affirmation, it's going to cut to the core of them. It's going to hurt a lot more. Maybe you're the kind that, if somebody says something to me, so what? I don't care. Big deal. Sticks and stones, right? But for words of affirmation people, it's completely opposite of that. You say, there are people who are who they are today in a negative way because of the way their parents talk to them. It matters how we talk. And this is the exact same way for children. If your child is a word of affirmation person, you're constantly putting them down. You never clean your room. You can't ever do this. Why can't you do this? Your sister does this. Why can't you? They're taking that on in a bigger manner than you ever thought about. It's important for us. This is why we need to learn and know and put the other person first. The other thing is desire versus demand. When you're talking, certainly to your spouse, to another human being, you don't demand things of them. You share your desire. Hey, it'd be really helpful if you would do this. Not, why can't you ever, or you never, or you always, or whatever the thing may be. You see how all those little things matter? And if I'm words of affirmation, if the way that your tone is, the way that you talk to me matters, then it's heightened for me. So one negative comment, I can be down on that for a couple of weeks. You've already moved on and you've already forgot about it. It wasn't that big of a deal. You didn't even mean anything by it. And they're sitting there stewing for the next 2 weeks. These things matter. So words of affirmation. So you need to find out, is your spouse words of affirmation? And the other thing is, like for me, I like to give compliments and those kind of things, but I want them to matter. Like, I don't just want you to think that I'm always saying these positive things to you and it doesn't have any meaning. So early on, I was really careful when I said I love you. I wanted to make sure that it was like in grand ways or whatever. Well, Amanda's words of affirmation, that's her number one thing. And so I had to learn early on that just saying I love you every day, even if it feels repetitive, is really, really important to her. And so these are things that I had to learn over time. So number one is words of affirmation. The second thing is quality time. Spending quality time together is, for some people, that's their number one way that they receive love. Now, this is really important to understand. Being in the same room together does not qualify as quality time. If she just happens to be in the room and you're running squads with your bros, so y'all know what I'm talking about, it's not quality time because she happens to be in there watching you, with your Fortnites and your Call of Duties and, those things. And that's fine if you do it. Me and my son, we run some Fortnite every once in a while. He's too cool for it now, but we used to. So I get it. I like gaming and that kind of stuff. But you know what I'm talking about. We can't consider quality time just because we're sitting in a room together. All right? Quality time means focused attention. I'm focusing my attention on you. You say this too. Going down Netflix for 3 hours is not quality time. That's divided attention. Watch movies together, that's all great. But what I'm talking about is if you have someone whose quality time is their number one love language, that means they want some focused time and attention with just you face to face. So what does that mean? That you sit there and you stare at each other in the eyes? No, it's weird. Don't do that. Also, sit on opposite sides of the table. That's weird to me when people sit on the side. That's just personal preference. Anyway, it's weird. Like, how can you talk to each other when you're right here? Anyway, that's my personal thing. So here's what quality time means. It means finding quality activities. What do they enjoy doing? Where we can have conversations, going on a walk. What is their thing that they like to do? For Amanda, I learned early on, and this is her number 2, that she enjoys shopping, which I hated. I added and she loves going to the beach, which I hated. But honestly, because I knew those were so important to her, I actually enjoy those things. We'll go shopping together for a long time. It doesn't bother me. I'm not going to say I enjoy it and love it, but I've learned to enjoy that time together. And I've learned to enjoy the beach. Now, I'm definitely afraid of the ocean, so that doesn't really make a lot of sense, so I don't get in there. And rightfully so. I've seen so many people getting eaten and everything. Anyway, that's a whole separate subject. I'm not weird for thinking the ocean's scary. You're weird for thinking it's not. There's an animal in there that's like the size of a semi-truck and bigger. We were on a mission trip in Mexico, and people are out there swimming, trying to, throwing their life to the wind or whatever. And this sea lion or whatever washed up, and this thing is bigger than me. This thing was huge. And it was not up, man. Something had chewed on that thing. That means that something that was bigger than twice me was eating on that thing. And people were out there swimming. And I'm the crazy one. Anyway. This took a completely different turn from quality activities. Find what your spouse likes to do and do those things. Spend some focused time on them. It also means quality conversation. For a person who this is big for them, number one or number two, they want to interact with you. Okay, they want to have a conversation. This is something, again, I had to learn to do. I had not seen this or experienced this, so I had to learn how to sit down and have a conversation. I'm pretty cut and dry. Most guys are. I'll spend, 4 hours golfing, 4 or 5 hours golfing with Buddy, and she'll be like, what'd you talk about? Nothing. You spent 4 hours together. No. Talked about the game. How's your family? I think they're fine. He didn't say anything, so. Well, how do you know? Well, if one of them died, I'm sure he would have said something to me while we were playing. That's just how guys are. That's just what we do, right? But she wants to know. She wants to hear, okay, what were your feelings about that? Well, I didn't play good. I don't know. But I had to learn that that's important to her, that we sit down and we have this conversation. Again, we talked early on about the fixing versus listening. I had to learn when it's time just to listen. And so what we do is we have time during the day. Every single day, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk. We're going to talk about the day, how to go, hey, what's going on tomorrow, what's our weekend look like. Focused time and attention. I'll tell you right now, if you are married, you should have it every single day. At some point during the day, stop running for 15 minutes, sit down and have a conversation. Don't say anything about your time and how busy you are. Okay. I don't have time to get into that, but that's a poor excuse. You have plenty of time. You make time for the things that are important to you. So quality time, okay? Third, acts of service. Okay, so this is cleaning the house, washing someone's car. These are like physical things that I do to show my love to you. And this is so early on in our relationship, I was really good at this. Like, I'll clean the house, I'll do the laundry, whatever. Like, I'm really good about that. And so I thought, I'm really meeting needs. Well, that's where I had to find out that she likes me doing that, but that's not her biggest love language. And so that was a revelation for me. But for some people, acts of service are huge. I want to know that you love me because you're helping me out or because you're doing things without me asking. Those things are really important. And inside of the acts of service, what's really important to ask is, what's the most important thing to that person? Okay, because we can be doing things for people, for our spouses, thinking that we're meeting needs, but that may not be the biggest thing they want you to do. There's, that your spouse may be really good at doing these things. Maybe they do the dishes all the time. And that doesn't necessarily mean they like to do those things. That doesn't mean that it's like, they don't ever complain about it. So they probably enjoy doing the dishes and all the laundry and all those things. But for them, maybe you doing that without them having to ask would be the biggest way to say, I love you, would fill their tank up more than anything else. But again, that's getting to know that person, putting them before you. And I'll say this, and it might be a little controversial, and you guys can talk this out. If you both work outside of the home, you should both work inside the home. Listen, we live in a different world. There was a season that women typically stayed home, the wife stayed home, the husband went to work. That's a different situation. If you're both working outside of the home, and then typically the wife is the one coming home and doing all the things, that's a bad setup. It's a bad setup. You can talk about how that needs to play out in your relationship. That's totally up to you. But we've got to change that line of thinking. That if you all are both contributing to working and bringing in income, you should both be contributing to keeping the house in order. And what that looks like in your house, that's up to you guys. Just know that I fully believe that with all my heart. Okay. Act of service. 4 is receiving gifts. This is typically the least of all the 5, but for some people, this is a really big deal, and there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make them vain or anything like that. This is just something that's how it speaks to them. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's important to understand, too, that doesn't just mean you have to buy everything for them, that they're just so vain, and then you can make gifts, you can purchase gifts, you can find gifts. There's all different kinds of ways to do gifting that's not just, they need a diamond ring every other week, right? Like if that's the person, then yes, you married a gold digger and you need to have some conversations with them, right? But for the most part, people love, it's a symbol of love. What do you do when you get married? You give each other what? Say it with words. You give each other rings, right? This is a symbol of love. I guess I didn't lead you guys very well on that. You give each other, anyway, you give each other rings. Why? Because it's a symbol of your love. The goal is that when you see that ring, you'll remember the oath that you made, the commitment you made, the love that you have for that person. For some people, that's what speaks really high I need symbols of love, different things. Make them something, right? And the greatest gift that you can actually give is the gift of yourself to that kind of person. That you gift yourself, whatever that looks like, whether it be time or activities or anything like that, that you give yourself to them. But be creative. If your person, if your spouse is big on gifts, if your child is big on gifts, be creative. Get outside the box. If you've never done that, go to Pinterest, man. That thing's a gold mine. I'm not crafty, but I've learned several things from there, and I'm not real good at it. But there's all kinds of things out there now. You can Google anything now. Back in the day, before internet, it was really tough. You had to come up with your own things. But know if that's their thing. The other thing is know that that's not their thing, because sometimes we just throw gifts at stuff, right? I wish I could get all the money back on the Beanie Babies that I spent, knowing that she's not gifts. So that's where my whole paycheck went back in the day. Anyway. The last is physical touch. And let's just be honest, for most men, this is number one. Now, this can be intimate or non-intimate touching. This can be hold-handing, hold-handing, or hand-holding. Yeah, that's what we do. We do hold-handing. Anyway, that's hand-holding. This can be, back rubs. This can be just a touch on the shoulder. But this is the least talked about gift inside of marriages. And really one of the most important for most men. And so I'll say this today. You need to have very open conversations in your relationship about physical touch. The other thing I will say is be here next week. Don't let your kids come in here, because we're going to talk a lot about that. And again, before you get all clammed up about talking about intimacy, read the New Testament. Read what they talked about in the churches then. And I guarantee you that our idea and your teenager's idea, it's being shaped by this world of what intimacy is. And it is a broken picture of what God meant for it to be. It is beautiful, and it is a gift, and there's so many great things about it that the world has turned. And shame on churches for not stepping in and talking about it. It's exactly what we should be doing, not straying away from it. And so come back next week. We're going to talk more about that and some other things. But man, let me just encourage you. Your job is to know and find out about your spouse. To consider them better than yourselves. In humility, to put them before you. So I've given you some short tools here. Now it's your job to go. And if you've never been through this, go through this together. Find out. Whenever I counsel with couples, I go through this. And then I have them write down each other's. Okay, what do you think her top two are? What do you think his top two are? Now write what yours are, and let's see how they match up. And a lot of times they get them right. A lot of times they already know them. A lot of times they're off. And it's a light bulb moment if you'll push into that. And I want to leave you with this. This is a quote from the book. I thought this was so good. If I am mature enough, my spouse's criticism about my behavior will give me the greatest insight into their love language. If I'm mature enough. If I just want to get upset and mad and woe is me, that's fine. If I'm mature enough, the things that they're nagging about, the things that they're upset about, will give me great insight into what their greatest loves are. And typically what's happening is, one, you're on the crazy cycle. You're not meeting each other's needs. But if there's nagging, if there's distance, if there's frustration, what's probably happened is the love tank has been drained, it's on empty, and it needs some care. And that is your responsibility. Whether it be in your spouse relationship, whether it be with your kids, whether it be with friends. It is your responsibility to consider them better than yourself. 1 John 4:19. We love because he first loved us. We have no excuses. There's no but there. We love because he first loved us. And sometimes it's not easy. Sometimes it's difficult. But the more we become selfless, and the more that we're intentional on loving that other person well, the easier it gets and the more fun it gets. You discover your spouse's love language and you start meeting those, they will start meeting your love languages, and it makes for a lot of fun and a lot of joy inside your home. Come back next week and we'll talk about some of that fun and some of that joy, okay? These are good things. It's a good thing. You should want to have fun and joy inside of, this should be the most joyful and fun relationship that you have on the face of this earth. You get to do things with each other and experience things that you'll never experience with anyone else. This is a good thing. We've got to give our heart to it, but we've got to start at the base that we love because he first loved us.
Once again, thank you for stopping by today. We'd love for you to be a part of our family at one of our services at 9 or 11 on Sunday. You can find out all of our information at simplechurchtulsa.com. And we'd love to pray for you any way we can, so please message us, and we hope you have a great week.